going to be speaking on the fires of anger and ill will. And as Tina's just mentioned, I've struggled myself a lot with anger and ill will over the years. And very specifically, over the last maybe 3 years or 3.5 years, I've had a very specific focus on working with this particular habit or this particular fetter of ill will, basically. So I've been working a lot with it over recent years. And as some of you know, in at least one school of Buddhism, there are these types, very crudely, people are characterized in 3 types: greed types, hate types, and deluded types. They all have particular character traits that go with these types. Naturally speaking, I've been a hate type. In my observation, most people are hate types. Maybe a minority, maybe I'm making this up, this figure, but maybe 20 or 30% are greed types, and deluded types are said to be somewhere in between. So maybe they're not even sure what they are. But as I say, I've been a hate type, so I very much had to work with this particular challenging tendency, if you like. And I'm hoping, I'll be very pleased and happy if you can just take away, 2 or 3 things that spoke to you, that you found helpful. I will consider my job complete. Basically, that's my hope for this evening, basically. So, as some of you know, and I've already just alluded to it, there's a famous image in Tibetan Buddhism called the Wheel of Life. It's a bit like looking into a mirror of the deluded mind or of limited consciousness. And right in the middle of this Wheel of Life are 3 images of animals. Yes, we have a pig, a snake, and a cockerel. And they're biting each other. It's going round and round and round. So these particular, they're called the 3 root poisons, very much influence and poison our lives. I just want to say a few words about each of these huge poisons. Yes? So by ignorance, I am not referring to, Buddhism is not referring to anything academic. It's not referring to your knowledge of Spanish history. It's not even referring to your knowledge of nutrition or political theory. That's not what's meant. What's meant, or some of the things that's meant by the word ignorance, spiritual ignorance, are things like a belief in a separate self, a belief in impermanence, a belief that you're independent. These kinds of beliefs and views in Buddhism are considered ignorant, that a belief in a separate self will give rise to suffering. And when you believe in a separate self, there's something that you want to protect, this idea of a self. When we come to greed, so with greed, we want to bring things, as it were, into ourselves. We feel, as it were, we believe that we're poor, and we want to acquire and consume. Yes, whether it's consuming ideas, being attracted to status, attracted to money, food, sex, drugs. Yes, we just want to consume. We're trying to fill something. We're dissatisfied. And we're trying to fill a pit, an inner pit of poverty. Yes? And we do this all the time. Especially if we're a greed type. So a hate type is, in a sense, the opposite of that. We don't want certain things to come in. We don't want to have that experience. We don't want to have things impinging on us. And if you're a hate type, or if you're prone to hatred, you push things away. You reject. You're experiencing aversion. No, I do not want that attention. No, I don't want that person there. No, I don't want to see anybody looking like that. So the tendency is to push away. Push away. So these are the three roots, very briefly put, of spiritual ignorance, greed, and craving. Now, I'm sure you're all here. Okay, you may have a particular interest in anger and ill will. Maybe, like me, you would describe yourself as a hate type. Maybe not. But we all experience these poisons. Yes, they're normal, actually. It's just a normal way that unenlightened consciousness functions. It's completely normal and natural. But of course, when we come to awareness practices, when we maybe do a 6-week or an 8-week meditation course, or we come on an openly Buddhist course, we want to be happy. No one said to me, I've come on the course because I want to increase the levels of pain in my life. No one has ever said that to me in the last 21 years. Because we want to be happy, we want to be loved, and we want to love. These three needs go deep. That's as it were, at the heart of us. These are fundamental human desires or needs. Healthy, as it were, desires or needs. So we come along, we want a nice, comfortable life, and we start meditating. Maybe the teacher gives us homework to do, and if we come along for months or years, things don't always go the way we would like them to go. We start noticing things. We start feeling things. We start having thoughts that we'd rather not have. Yeah? And this is a completely normal process. Because usually when we come to the practice, when we come to the Dharma, when we come to meditation, most of us, I'm sure there are a few exceptions, don't really know ourselves very well or very deeply. Yeah? So one aspect of training, one aspect of Dharma training is integration. And what I mean by that is, at least two things by that. One is becoming familiar with the whole range of our experiences, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and on the other hand, putting that awareness to the service of a higher value or a higher principle. Now, what happens? So we might start experiencing, for example, what Carl Jung would say. Carl Jung might use the word shadow. Who's heard of that word, shadow? Okay, some people. So, actually I don't use the word quite in the same way that he does. what he meant by that word was coming to recognise, coming to meet aspects of your own psyche, your own heart and mind, which consciously you want to reject or disown or not accept. Okay? Now, what he tended to do was speak about very unpleasant sides to human nature. But I think that is very, very true, but I don't think it's just unpleasant sides of our nature that we might find ourselves rejecting. You might notice, and I'm certainly speaking from personal experience, that you might reject positive emotions that you're not used to. Yes? You might find gratitude, for example, an uncomfortable emotion. It's possible. I can think of some research right now comparing German men with American men, for example, where American men were uncomfortable with this emotion, where German men were quite comfortable with it. Oh, we've got a German and an American man here, okay. Or it could be, you might notice that the whole area of sexuality, we might talk about it like this with our friends every 10 minutes, etc. But when it comes down to it, we might notice that there are quite a lot of areas of discomfort in us in terms of being at home or comfortable with our own sexual interests and appetites, etc. Or it could be around aggression. Maybe there are aggressive sides to you. Or envy. You might discover actually you're a lot more envious than your mask appears to show. Or it could be tenderness. I remember being very, very uncomfortable when I was feeling in the early years of meditation practice, when I was experiencing quite strong feelings of tenderness towards even people in my family. And it was taboo. Not on. Taboo. We do not, touching in our family was taboo. There was no touch. Very, very, very little touch in our family. So when I suddenly started wanting to touch people, it was really quite uncomfortable. It was really quite uncomfortable. It took quite a while to overcome these feelings of discomfort, etc. Now, it can be challenging enough when we're experiencing unpleasant emotions. That can be difficult enough. It's not nice experiencing envy. It's not nice experiencing aggression or anger or sadness for that matter. But what can be even more unpleasant, and I've hinted at it already, is the clash between the experience and your self-view. If I am Mr. Nice, because I am Mr. Nice Buddhist, if I have that view of myself that I'm Mr. Friendly, and actually if I regularly experience anger and aggression, there's going to be a tension there between the view, the self-view and the experience. Or you might, if you're a woman, for example, you're often taught, no, it's bad to be angry, it's not very feminine or ladylike, etc., blah, blah, blah. This can be quite a tension for some people. Yes? A few nods in the room. Well, it's definitely like that for me. I had, as I said earlier, great difficulties with anger. I really couldn't really allow myself to consciously experience anger. Many people are comfortable with it, but many aren't. And it was this particular fact. I don't think I've openly talked about this before here in Istanbul before, but I mentioned that in the worst 6 months of my life were lived in Istanbul. For a 6-month period, I kind of blocked off an instant reaction towards a friend, and I just sort of caved in on myself. I was ashamed of my reaction, and strong tension formed. And it was horrible. It lasted for about 6 months. Nowadays I could sort of unravel that probably in about 3 minutes, knowing, yes, that's probably true. Now, it's very, very important in all this teachings, in all these teachings in the Dharma life, it's really, really important that as much as possible at the moment, that we are honest with ourselves. With ourselves. I'm not even expecting it, maybe you can confide in 1 or 2 or 3 people who you really trust. So it's very, very important that we don't pretend we're feeling something when we're not. At least to ourselves. Or we don't need to pretend that you're not angry if you are angry, or you're not greedy if you are greedy. It's really important that we're able to do this, because so many of us are frightened of our emotions. I'm talking about anger. For you, it could be you're completely ashamed of being jealous, or you're completely ashamed of your sexuality, or just how greedy you are when nobody's around. Now, this is really, really important, because if we don't, as I've just given you a 6-month example, if we don't allow ourselves to experience the vitality of our emotions, even if they're not ideal, we can get sick. Okay, we can get physically sick, and our sickness and our repression doesn't just poison us. By nature, we are contagious. Our fear is contagious. Our repressed energy is contagious. Our affection is contagious. Our joy is contagious. So it just affects everything. Yeah, the stakes are high. We need to be, as much as possible, open to our energies and open to our emotional vitality, and that can take some work. As I said, there's usually a certain emotion that we're usually uncomfortable with, and we'll need to gradually learn how to befriend those emotions. So when I talk about anger and ill will, I'm referring to a whole variety and a range of intensity of mental states. So I'm referring to things like impatience, irritation, annoyance, rage, fury, quiet, passive, aggressive behaviour, and of course the will to kill. The whole range. It's the mechanism is the same. The mechanism is a reaction to push away. It's the same mechanism, but just varying degrees of subtlety or crudeness. Better keep an eye on the time. Sometimes you can find Buddhist teachers making a distinction, saying that ill will and hatred is always unskillful and unhelpful, or extremely unhelpful and extremely unskillful. And they sometimes say that anger, it's possible for anger at least not to be unskillful. In some situations, or on some occasions, it's possible maybe to experience anger that I call clean. There is no desire in the anger to hurt somebody or damage a group of people. So the main example that's given is when the anger breaks through the frustration of not communicating. So sometimes anger can break through frustration to communicate well. Or possibly, I'm struggling to think of genuine examples, that anger could be helpful in times where there's danger and we need instant energy and instant protection. There could be maybe when someone's maybe being violent towards an animal or a person or a child, etc. You might have a strong burst of anger that motivates you, but your aim is not to hurt anyone in the situation. Now, yes, I have come across this distinction, but if I am honest, generally speaking, even when I'm experiencing anger, there is some desire to hurt or to injure, even if it's with one word or one sentence or just in the mind. I think it is possible, but you need to be extremely mindful of yourself, extremely mindful of your body, extremely mindful of your emotions, and extremely mindful of your intention in the situation. So it's possible for anger to be helpful in some situations. But generally in this talk, I'm going to be referring to anger still as unskillful in this particular talk. I'm going to give you one example of skillful anger. So this is before I was in the Triratna Buddhist order. I was in training. There was another order member who I used to work in a Buddhist gift shop, and he was trying to sell us something. And I experienced suspicion and some irritation towards him. I didn't really like the way he was communicating, and he picked up on this. And sometime afterwards he contacted me and said he wants to come round and meet me. So he came to my house, came to my bedroom one evening, and I was back into my kind of blaming mode, and he just blasted me with about 10 seconds of clean anger and said, "I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here because I want to connect with you." And I was just disarmed. I thought, oh, okay, okay. But it's one of the cleanest experiences of helpful, clean anger that I've come across. And then we had a fairly productive, fairly constructive conversation, communication after that. But he had to break through my posturing, and he did a good job. Okay, in the remainder of the talk, I'm going to be talking about possible attitudes, possible perspectives, and creative responses towards anger and ill will, to work with anger and ill will, and possibly even to undermine their foundations. Okay? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is it's important to take active responsibility for the kinds of conditions that we place ourselves in. We are responsible for the conditions that we place ourselves in. What effect do those conditions have on your own mind, heart, and the quality of your speech and your writing? Do you notice that some situations, some contexts, encourage you to be angry, irritable, frustrated, impatient? Do you spend too much time on certain websites? Do you spend too much time maybe with the news that tends to make you frustrated or righteously indignant all the time? Do you spend too much time with people who are very critical? What effect does their constant criticism have on you? Does it encourage your friendly, patient nature, or does it encourage your irritability and impatience. Do you say yes when you mean no? Does that ever happen? Do you get angry or resentful that you said yes when you meant no? Does that ever happen? Okay, this is all part of our kind of conditioning. Another very useful thing to bear in mind, just to help minimise misunderstanding, minimise confusion, minimise resentment maybe, is communicating as clearly as possible. Be really mindful. Are you being vague in your communication? Are you telling the person exactly what you mean, or exactly where to meet, when to meet, what time, etc.? Or is it just a laid back, any time between 2 and 10 will do, okay? So I think clear, direct and firm communication in many situations is an investment not to get irritable or impatient later, basically. So it's worthwhile bearing in mind those points. My next point is related in some ways, actually. It is related. Is go forth from fault finding. Do you find yourself, do you notice that you find it really easy to find faults in people? Have you noticed they're not perfect? Have you noticed that you talk about that person, that boss, that colleague not being perfect again and again? Do you, when you think about something, a problem, a social, economic or ecological issue, that you're constantly focusing on the shortcomings and the problems? Many people have very critical, blaming kind of minds. Well, watch that. It's been said, if I remember rightly, by one Tibetan teacher, that samsara is the tendency to find fault with others. Samsara is the tendency to find fault with others. So I'm going to suggest the complete opposite of training our eyes, training our attention to notice what is good, to notice what is beautiful in somebody, to notice their kind, aware, courageous, brave behaviour. Yes? Or to use Buddhist jargon, to rejoice in merits, to rejoice in the positive, skillful, positive deeds in other people, and ourselves actually. There's no reason why we can't rejoice in our own better nature, in our own positive qualities. It's a training in noticing what is good in this person, what is good in this situation, and to give voice to it. People love having their merits rejoiced in. It makes them really happy, and suddenly love is flowing a lot more if we pay attention to what is positive and skillful and loving in a person or a situation. So another point, my next point, is about aggression. We all experience aggression at least some of the time, men and women. We might express it in different ways. Possibly we might have more or less tendencies towards anger and aggression, but we all, nearly all of us at least, have some will to aggression, if you like. And we need to be really honest about that, really. And one, I think, very helpful suggestion is looking for constructive ways to channel our aggression. What constructive ways, what even creative ways do you have for channeling your aggression? Yes, it will make you feel better, and it'll hopefully make you more friendly towards other people, actually, paradoxically. So the sorts of things I'm thinking about are mainly physical. I think many of us, if we're looking to practice a mindful and aware life, many of us for many years can very much benefit from a physical discipline, not just meditating all the time. So it could be something like well-taught karate. It could be going to the gym. Maybe some weightlifting, getting some of your energy and your aggression out. It could be certain other forms of martial arts, ethical forms of martial arts, like Shorinji Kempo, that has a very ethical Zen Buddhist basis to it. In my own case, during most of the 1990s, I danced. That was the best way I could transform my own resentment and tension was to dance. Sometimes I would dance for 2 days to release. 2 days means 12 hours on a 2-day workshop, for example, just to sort of let go of something I've been really tight. I used to get into these terrible patterns regularly. It's very horrible being Vajracaksu in the 90s, except when the joy arose in the dance and I was really happy for an hour, something like that. Or it could be like simple things like walking fast, deliberately walking fast. Maybe some of you don't want to do very physical things. You might find writing, especially spontaneous, not holding anything back writing, where there's no rules, no inhibitions. Just go, in the words of one writing teacher, go for the jugular, where there's you're feeling energy in your writing. Go into the energy and just keep writing, and it will transform. I did that also for a period of time. So some of you might find that useful to think about, what constructive outlets do I have for my aggression? I've now just thought of an example. A woman psychotherapist mentioned to me. Her example was swimming. I thought it was very delicate, but swimming. Some people can sort of put their aggression into the water. In fact, there's a young man who comes here. He does a brutal martial art. It's the most brutal martial art I've ever heard of and come across. It's mixed martial arts. He's only about 21, but he loves doing it. And he if he doesn't fight for 1 week, you can get quite tense and a bit agitated. And he starts, doing some kickboxing with his girlfriend, etc., or kicking her head in the kitchen, etc., without touching her. But the thing I found very, very endearing was that he said after doing all this meditation, they fight, but he loves his partners more. The people he fights, he loves them even more now. He said that. He says he's full of love now. On one occasion, he was sitting near where Tina was sitting. His armour came out. His shoulder came out. He got beaten, and he said, anyway, I don't recommend that. That's not a recommendation. Okay, let's move on. So a next point or a teaching, I think it comes from. I'm going to mention him. Oh, I forgot to mention him actually. It comes from a man called Shanti Devi, who maybe 2 or 3 people have heard of. He, to the best of my recollection, he says if you're feeling angry, and it's quite strong anger, he says, be like a block of wood. Be like a block of wood. Or to quote Mevlana, in anger and fury, be like the dead. That's quite strong.